Hello everybody, this is Bird Brain. We're here, we are nerdy for the birdies. The Philadelphia Eagles have finally begun to make moves in free agency, and while these aren't the, barn burner type moves that are going to completely flip the team around, I think the Eagles added some solid depth pieces to this roster. And, it may not be what the fans are necessarily looking for, but I definitely think that we're starting to see this roster take a little bit of shape. Just a little bit. Anyway, so we have a lot of moves to talk about from the last 2 days. I would have done a video yesterday, but I decided, they haven't really done too much yet. I'll wait till they get a few signings, and then today the Eagles woke up and, I guess, decided to be dangerous and sign like 3 players. So, we have a lot of players to talk about, so let's get into it. First one to talk about is a reunion. Ben Van Sumerman is back with the team. He's a linebacker, fullback for this roster, and this is somebody I had predicted the Eagles would bring back in my Stay or Go last week. Not very surprised at all. He was somebody that was a restricted free agent. He was going to have, he was going to be someone that most likely would play special teams, and he's going to take snaps on offense for fullback. Figured he would come back because in interviews, he was talking about how he was going to change his number next year, so it sounded like he knew he was coming back, so not a big shock here. Again, not a move that's going to change much, but there's your starting fullback and, of course, special teams linebacker. So, that's good. Then we move on to A.J. Dillon, the former running back of the Packers. Dillon missed the 2024 season with neck problems, but he's back on a cheap contract for the Eagles. Obviously, there's concerns about the neck injury, right? Because people have said, like, oh, this is shades of Rashad Penny. And the thing is, I don't mind these types of signings, right? Because, number one, it hardly costs you anything. Like, this is not significant cap space going to this player. You see what you have over the summer. If he's good, great. If he's not, you cut him and move on. And it's not going to cost you a ton, if anything at all. He, though, on the field, when healthy, can provide a nice role as that power back, similar to a Jordan Howard type, similar to a Garrett Blunt type. He's a decent receiver, not like great hands, but he can catch a little bit. But again, you think about the power that he can bring as a runner, you think about what he could do behind a Saquon Barkley. I love Saquon, but we have to be careful with his carries in the season and how much of a workload he gets. He's paid very highly, but you don't want to wear him down too much, especially after this very long season. So, you might want to maybe lower his carries by just a few a game. Get him to roughly around 20 touches instead of 20 plus carries. If you can get him to that point. If Dillon comes in, I think that would also be nice. And I don't think this really disrupts Will Shipley, because I think a lot of what Will Shipley will do is what Gainwell used to do. And if you think back a couple years to when the Eagles had Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell, and Jordan Howard, it wasn't so much they were kind of stepping on each other. They had their different roles and they were used in different ways at different times in the game. And especially late in games, last year, the Eagles weren't the best at just simply running out of clock. A.J. Dillon's going to be a lot better at that, being able to just plow through these heavy stacked boxes. Again, I don't expect him to be like a world beater Pro Bowl running back, but as a backup that if Saquon missed a game or two, could he start in a pinch? Maybe, we'll see. Who knows? I still think the Eagles will add at running back in the draft. I haven't really gotten to studying the running backs yet, but who knows? And then this morning, we woke up and saw the Eagles had added Josh Uche. This player was someone I was actually interested in the Eagles trading for at the deadline. He ended up going to the Chiefs. But the Eagles managed to sign him in free agency for a very low contract as well. Again, just a depth edge rusher. I don't think this is a signing that speaks to the idea of like, oh, well, now the Eagles won't draft edge. Trust me, this is a very good edge class. But you need depth, right? You have to replace, at bare minimum, Josh Sweat and probably Brandon Graham. You only have 3 other guys on the roster right now that you really believe are going to be starting. So, get somebody cheap. And look, a lot of people have talked about his 2022 season where he had 11.5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. Like, if he can get back to form, great. You got a great pass rusher on the cheap. But again, we just don't know. So, it'll depend. We'll see what happens. Then, of course, you have Harrison Bryant, the tight end from the Browns and Raiders. signing another cheap contract, and I really like this signing. This arguably may be my favorite of the group. Not because I think Harrison Bryant is a game changer, but I think he kind of sets up the tight end group pretty nicely. So you have Calcaterra this year. We'll see what happens with Dallas Goedert, but most likely, right, Harrison Bryant is more of your blocking type. Think about Jack Stoll, but I think he provides a little bit more as a receiver than Jack Stoll did. You know, Jack Stoll can catch a pass every now and then if the Eagles needed it, but for the most part, he was on the field to block. I think Bryant, you can actually legitimately use as a receiver and as a blocker. He's not going to get a huge volume of targets, but hey, you look at his stats, a lot of the times he was used a lot in the red zone. You watch some of his games, they used him in short yardage a little bit. If you do end up moving on from Dallas Goedert, you know, and your tight end core is, you know, Calcaterra, Bryant, and let's say they draft Mason Taylor, who I love in the draft, and we'll talk about him next week. You draft that group, that's a solid tight end core, and that's how you kind of move on from a Dallas Goedert. That's how you can kind of replace that, and that's a better tight end group than they had last year, where it was pretty much, if Goedert wasn't healthy, it was just Calcaterra and then everybody else, and Calcaterra is not the best blocker. So here you get someone that's better built to block. And then last but not least, the Eagles signed Adoree Jackson, a cornerback who played for the Titans and Giants. I've seen the clip going around again of the pick six he got last year on Christmas against Jalen Hurts when Goedert slipped. But obviously, you know, not a fun thing to watch happen, but, you know, he's a decent corner, and I think he's going to push someone like Kelee Ringo if they're going to battle for the starting job. And again, the big thing about these deals, these are cheap deals, and if these guys aren't good, you cut them and move on. It means the starters, the guys we already have, or guys we'll draft are better, and you want the best players on your roster. And I think, you know, Adoree Jackson's going to come and compete and be a decent corner. And I think if he had to start for us this season, I think it would be okay. You know, Quignon's your CB1, he's your CB2, DeJean's in the nickel. You know, I think you'd be in a really good spot. But yeah, so a lot of backup, you know, depth signings, maybe trying to fight for roster spots type signings, but not a lot of huge big name stuff. And this is more or less what I expected out of the Eagles. And frankly, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it because, you know, bargain bin shopping, this is what kind of championship teams do. This is what, you know, you look at the Chiefs. They had to be a little cheap this year on some of the bargain bin shopping. Like, they had to go find a left tackle. You know, they gave a $15 million contract to a guy that was a backup on the Niners. You know, you look around the league, you look at the Bills, they haven't really made any huge splash moves. You know, they got Joey Bosa, but it's like older Joey Bosa and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. It's to me, right, like, because of the guys you already have on this roster, especially your star players, I don't feel like you have to press yourself in free agency. And with the trades that Howie's made in the last couple of days, you've now accumulated almost 20 picks in the draft. And it could potentially get you 20 depending on how comp picks work. And if you do that, you can use that to move up and down the board in the drafts, the next two. You can do that for making trades for other players and all these other things. So you're actually set up pretty nicely here. And again, I like the signings basically on the idea that they're mostly depth, but you never know. I mean, last year this time we all thought Zach Bond was just, he's a depth guy. Oren Burks, he's just a depth guy, who cares? And they ended up playing big roles on this team. You never know. So I'm going to remain cautiously optimistic. I think the Eagles' free agency, while it's not necessarily been a great free agency because of all the losses they've had, I think they've been doing the right thing. And right now they're eating their vegetables, and you know, if they do that for a month, then eventually then they'll be able to get dessert, which in that case it could be the draft, it could be signing better free agents later on after the draft. You know, who knows what happens there. Anyway, so this is Bird Brain. Hope you guys enjoyed being nerdy for the birdies. Fly Eagles fly. See you guys around.